Welcome back, everybody. Joe Concha filling in for Steve Malsberg on this Friday. Don't forget, coming up, former vice presidential candidate, former Alaska governor, best-selling author, New Jersey Devils fan, which I learned off camera, Sarah Palin. But first, speaking of sports, Pitbull, yes, well, she's a hockey mom, right?
Isn't that the
lipstick?
Right,
the,
yeah.
Remember that?
Looking for a transition there, but not finding it.
We all know Dave Briggs, formerly of Fox and Friends Weekend, then made the big jump to NBC Sports. You're the Keith Olbermann of your era. You are the back and forth guy.
Don't do that to me.
You are the Ronald Reagan went from sports to politics. I guess it's
I like
politics.
that.
All right. There's
a lot of
else.
movement back and forth. I don't know if Keith Olbermann is the role model, but there is a lot of movement back and forth.
You are the nephew of Brian Kilmeade, who is also coming up on this show a little bit later. It's a Fox and Friends reunion, basically, here.
Yeah. Bring it on. Yeah, we do a new show. If you check it out, it's called SportsDash, noon Eastern on NBC Sports Network.
On the NBC
with
Sports
Yahoo Sports, some good people there.
NBC Sports is just killing it. I mean, with Sunday Night Football, the ratings are just through the roof. The NFL is anybody who has any rights to the NFL right now is counting their money because no matter what goes on off the field, for whatever reason, people keep watching. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, they want to say that it's getting hurt. None of this scandal, none of the bullying, none of it hurts the NFL. You're talking about
Redskins
the Giants. Look at these garbage games are getting 12, 13, 14, 15 million people. That
or maybe complemented by the fact that, for instance, I have two fantasy teams. And my wife has a fantasy team, and I drafted 4. So therefore, I have to watch because I have like 80 players I got to follow. And maybe there's a financial investment in the game, if gambling were legal, of course, outside of Vegas. You think that because other sports you can gamble on, but it's not quite the same thing. But the NFL, because of that aspect, gambling, fantasy football, and just the violence of it, is that why we're seeing those ratings even on horrible games?
The fantasy football, I think, helps explain some of the bad ratings or the good ratings on the bad games. But what shocks you with the NFL is the amount of women that watch the NFL. And I know women play fantasy football, but not to the level that men do.
5 million play in the last survey I saw. 5 million.
Yet you're seeing Sunday Night Football as the most watched show on television by women, which is hard to believe, hard to fathom. And it's in part fantasy. I think it's just the drama is perfect. Mm-hmm. It's the best television product. You know, baseball, great game, not a great TV game. Hockey, bad TV game. NBA, a little better on television, but the product for the NFL, how up close you and personal you can get into that action, and the drama, I think, quite frankly, only helps.
So you laugh then when you see Richie Incognito, Jonathan Martin, is it bullying? Will this hurt the league? Or anytime a player gets a DUI, and it seems to happen every week, I think they can afford to call a cab, by the way. I can't understand why that keeps happening, or not even afford to call a cab. The league actually has a program where you can just call a number, it's anonymous, and you'll get a ride home, and yet they keep doing it. And there's all this outrage.
Or if you're Dwayne Bowe, leave your weed at home.
Leave the weed. Look, that is a cardinal rule that they should be teaching in orientation.
It's not a terrible idea. Mm-hmm. Don't smoke it would be number one, but if you're going to, leave it at home. They don't test for drugs during the NFL season. That stops at the preseason.
Right.
So if you're that guy, leave it at home. Yes, take a cab. But no, I don't think any of that can hurt the league. Richie Incognito, Jonathan Martin, is there bullying?
What do you think of sensitivity?
Yes, there's bullying in every locker room. Believe me, I've been in locker rooms for 10 years, and there's a lot of it in all of them. It's the culture. It's built into the fabric of the NFL. And the interesting way that story's gone is, at first it was Jonathan Martin was sympathetic figure, the guy that everyone would welcome back. Now, clearly Richie Incognito will have a much easier time returning to an NFL team, whether it be the Dolphins or anyone else. Jonathan Martin may never come back to an NFL team because he will not be welcome.
Is it, Dave, because it's like the mob mentality that he's a turncoat, that he went out and exposed, he went behind shield and said, you know what, I'm getting picked on, I don't like it, and everybody's basically saying, you know what, you're a pussycat, pal, all right, deal with it. And Richie Incognito, it's amazing the kind of support he's had from players saying, you know what, Richie's not at fault here, this is Jonathan Martin's fault, and it kind of flies in the face of the media narrative, which is, oh, of course it's Richie Incognito's fault. It's guilty until you're proven innocent.
Well, and all the guys defending Incognito all admit the guy is a Class A bleep hole. I mean, this guy is a bad dude. Everyone I've spoken to in the NFL, current and former players, all the first word out of their mouth is jerk. The guy's a jerk, and everybody knows that. But This stuff happens. They knew what they were getting with Richie Incognito. And yes, Martin broke the code. And if you're not tough enough to handle this, there are mechanisms to solve it. Go upstairs, let them know what you're feeling. You don't go outside, and look at what he's created.
Yeah.
But it looks like he's setting up a big lawsuit. I mean, that's probably where this ends. His mom, I don't know if his mom is a lawyer going back into workplace harassment issues decades and has written columns on workplace harassment. It looks like they're laying the groundwork for a lawsuit against the Dolphins, against the NFL. I'd be surprised if it doesn't end that way. This is a guy that does not want to play football. Jonathan Martin does not like the culture. I'm not sure he likes the game of football.
Is that because he comes from Stanford and he comes from maybe a more polished background, that when he goes into that locker room and the Richie Incognitos of the world are the nutcases, that he's just like, look, I'm too civilized for this sport?
Right. The guys I've spoken to that know Jonathan well tell me this is a guy that never really had the desire to play football. He never loved football, but he was a big, giant guy with athleticism that it just seemed natural. This is what he was going to do, and he was very good at it, and then all of a sudden it paid him millions of dollars. He never stood back and said, do I really like this game? Do I have the motor? Do I have the drive and desire to play this game? Clearly, he does not.
Interesting. Going on to another piece of political correctness that we're seeing in the NFL, and that's the Washington Redskins controversy. And the public, I'm not going to say the public calls, the press calling for Snyder to change the name from Redskins because it's seen as offensive. Do you see the Washington Redskins name as offensive, and should it be changed?
Number one, there's far too many dudes like you and me discussing this situation. I don't frankly care what a bunch of white people think about this. I want Native Americans to sit down, and I would like to hear the discussion between the pros and the cons, and I'd like to hear both sides. And I think, to his credit, that's what Dan Snyder has done. He's listened to the people that want it removed. He's listened to the people that want to keep it. And he is sticking by his guns. And he's not doing a good enough job in conveying the point that he intends to honor Native American heritage by keeping that name. Mm-hmm. He's not trying to disparage. He does not think this is. Do I think it's a seems asinine? No, I think it's bad term that should be gone. But if I'm Dan Snyder, I'm sticking to my guns. I would just do a better job of PRing the situation.
Okay, because that's the thing, right? Dan Snyder paid $800 million for this team in 1998. It hasn't won a playoff game, I believe, since then. It's been 15 years, okay? So it's not like he's putting a winning product on the field. Yet they're number 2 in the league in attendance year in, year out. For the last 10 years, it's the most profitable team in the NFL, and that everybody is making money like we talked about before.
Yeah.
So what impetus does he have to change the name when everybody keeps showing up to the games? You can look it up, Google it. If you're at home right now, everybody, Google Redskins protest outside of stadium, and you won't find one going on out there. Not even like 3 guys with a sign. Yeah. Nothing. So it's not hurting him from a PR perspective because there's no mass protests and his wallet isn't being affected. So he never has an impetus to change his name, yet it keeps staying in the press. People keep talking about it.
Well, when you have the president add his voice to the conversation, that certainly changes the dialogue a little bit. And there's one guy left in the conversation that is Roger Goodell, the most powerful man in all of sports. Once he comes down and says, look, it's time.
Can he do that, though, to a private business?
What can't Roger Goodell do? I'm not convinced he couldn't pull the plug on this right now if he wanted to. I think that eventually someone's going to explain to Dan Snyder that he could make another $1 billion by selling brand new merchandise and look like a good guy in the public. So if he can sell brand new jerseys, sweatshirts, hats, mugs. Think of the stuff. People wear socks with NFL names on them.
But could it be new Coke, too? It could be new Coke. It gets rejected.
It could, but it's the NFL. People are going to buy that stuff, especially one of the most die-hard fan bases in all of sports. They're going to buy your product.
I have a theory.
It's inevitable. The name will change at some point.
If the name changes because of Goodell won't demand that it gets done because he knows maybe even legally can't do that.
Right.
But here's what he could do. So, you want a Super Bowl in Washington, huh? Change that name, and your stadium gets that Super Bowl. What do you think? And all the reasons that you said. You're going to look good. You're going to sell new merchandise. Everybody wins. And then Snyder, a businessman, may say, you know what? That's not the worst idea in the world.
What does a Super Bowl mean to an organization like that in the hundreds of millions of dollars? It will eventually come down to, yes, dollars and cents in some way. It won't be Dan Snyder caving to political correctness. That ain't never going to happen.
Speaking of off the field issues, and that's all we're talking about here. I'd love to talk X's and O's with you, but famous Jameis Winston, all right, Heisman Trophy favorite, I think, up until last week.
No question about it. Still the Heisman Trophy favorite.
You think so?
Yeah,
okay.
no question.
Accused of sexual assault, right? Actually, hasn't been arrested. There haven't been any charges yet. Is that enough to taint his story? Kind of the different, the 180 of Manti Te'o, where he had the great story. Will this be enough for people to say, screw it, just give it to Johnny Manziel?
I think if you have guys that are tied going into it, sitting in New York, if Manziel, he's thrown a few too many interceptions, I think, right now. If he can finish over the top and really put his numbers up to Winston's level, I absolutely think it will be enough to taint. Just in the back of your mind, does this guy have the character? Because some people admit they just vote for on-the-field prowess. Some guys say, I want to vote for a good character as well. But look, you got to realize there is nothing linking Winston to this crime at this point. There are 2 witnesses that say they were with Winston the very night 11 months ago. The police never interviewed Winston. The criminal complaint, she is not speaking up. The state's attorney's office just found out about this a couple of days ago. Well, on one hand, you could say that means the Tallahassee PD was burying this thing star quarterback. 11 months ago, Jameis Winston, nobody knew his name. Nobody knew his name. So it wasn't protecting your Heisman Trophy quarterback. This was before anyone knew his name. I don't think there's anything on this. I think by the time we roll around to Heisman Trophy voting, Winston will have been cleared. And I also think he'll put himself far ahead of the pack in terms of, you got Manziel. I think Mariota's probably already slid a little bit. Bryce Petty from Baylor is in the conversation, and Jordan Lynch from Northern Illinois also could be in the conversation. But I think Winston's numbers will just put him over the top.
Interesting. We've got about a minute left, so I'm sure our Newsmax audience is seeing Dave Briggs and be like, wow, the guy from Fox, he's back.
That I still, to this day, that's 10-1 how I'd get recognized as, oh, you used to be on Fox and Friends. That's
amazing.
Yeah.
I don't think people really appreciate the fact that when you work for a morning show, you got to get up at 2 a.m., 2:30 a.m., right? Perform for 4 hours straight in a live setting, all these different guests. Not like you're covering one topic. You're doing cooking segments. There's dogs running around.
Straight into politics, straight into Egypt, and it makes your head want to explode. But it's the best rush I think I've ever had on television, just in terms of when you walk off that set. While I couldn't actually think clearly, that juggling act is just a fantastic rush.
Wow.
Getting up early, I do not miss one bit.
It's tough, definitely.
Oh, it just buries your day. How the aforementioned Brian Kilmeade does it, I have no idea. I never did it 5 days a week. Not sure I could.
Dave Briggs, thanks so much for being here. Dave Briggs, NBC Sports, SportsDash, Noons, NBC Sports Network.
Eastern, NBC Sports Network.
Have a good weekend.